I just watched the Lawrence Okolie Isaac Chamberlain weigh-in, and these are my thoughts on the weigh-in and my final thoughts before the fight. At the face-off, I mean, both guys looked in tremendous condition, first and foremost, especially Isaac Chamberlain. That's by far the best condition I've ever seen him in, which is testament to how seriously he's taking this fight. One of the things that has bothered me a little bit about Isaac Chamberlain is that he doesn't seem to be the most naturally confident person. And whenever this Lawrence Okolie fight was talked about, he seemed a bit hesitant, let's say a year ago or 8 months ago, whenever it was when they first started talking about the fight. He seemed a bit hesitant and non-committal about fighting Lawrence Okolie. And even going back to when he fought Wadi Camacho, I think it was going into the Camacho fight, Eddie Hearn said that Isaac was kind of 50-50 about whether he wanted to take the fight. And Eddie Hearn was like, come on, you've been a pro for long enough now. You need to step it up. And, you know, he seemed to indicate that Isaac wasn't really sure about himself. So, yeah, I have been a little disturbed by Isaac's seeming lack of self-confidence. In the Wadi Camacho fight, though, he did prove that he was very tough physically because he had a dislocated shoulder and he had to battle through it. Many fighters would have retired on the stool with that type of injury. He battled through it and won. So he's definitely got some toughness in him, but there is a difference between toughness and confidence. You know, you could even say somebody like David Price is tough, maybe not in terms of his chin, but in his ability to just stand there and take a beating like he did against Christian Hammer, for example. He hung in there. It's not like he quit against Christian Hammer. Maybe David Price ain't the greatest example. Some people might say he kind of was looking for a way out, but still, you get my point. There are certain fighters who are tough. They can take a beating, but they don't really have the confidence to go out there and win certain fights against certain fighters. So that's always been my reservation a little bit about Isaac Chamberlain. And one of the main reasons why I've been picking Lawrence Okolie to beat him, not because of the skill sets of both men, because actually Isaac Chamberlain, I've seen all along, has got the more polished boxing ability, the more correct technique, and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't lunge as much as Lawrence Okolie. He doesn't leave himself open as much as Lawrence Okolie. He just seems to be the slicker, more defensively astute boxer. So I've seen all that. But as the cliche goes, boxing is 80% mental. And you could be technically better than a guy, but if you're not confident enough, you could go in there and lose to somebody who is not even as good as you technically. So that can happen. And it's not just the mental side of it. Obviously, there is punching power and height and reach and a whole host of other things that you have to take into account when it comes to who's going to win a boxing match or who does win a boxing match. But nevertheless, that's been one of my reservations about Isaac. My main reservation is not his physical ability, not his technical ability that I've been bothered by. It's my perception that he has a lack of self-confidence, a lack of natural self-confidence. But at the weigh-in and all week, this week leading up to the fight, Isaac has seemed far more confident than I've ever seen him before. And that is actually making me feel like this is a much, much, much closer fight than I initially anticipated. I always was picking Lawrence Okolie, and I'm sticking with Lawrence Okolie as my prediction. But whereby I saw it as like a 60-40 in Lawrence's favor before, now I'm seeing it more like maybe 53-47 in Lawrence's favor. So I'm seeing it almost a 50-50 now because Isaac seems to have got this confidence. Now, Lawrence Okolie says that he's got this confidence from his uncle Ted Bammy and the rest of his people who have been gassing him up. Maybe he has, but whatever works, works. As long as he don't get reckless, as long as he don't become contemptuous of Lawrence Okolie and his punching power, then whatever method they've used to make Isaac confident, I think it's all good. And it should help get the best out of him in the ring. Now, Lawrence is a naturally laid back but confident character. That's how he always comes across to me. Very jovial guy, kind of funny guy, you know, good sense of humor and whatnot. But at the weigh-in, he didn't want to look Isaac in the eye. When you're dealing with two very experienced fighters, you can dismiss that kind of thing. When you're dealing with Mayweather versus Pacquiao, who looked away during the stare down was irrelevant because they've both been there, seen it and done it. Makes no difference. But when you're dealing with two inexperienced guys, if a guy don't want to look the other one in the eye, sometimes that actually can mean something because both guys haven't been there, seen it and done it. Sometimes that can be an indication that there's some type of doubt creeping into that fighter's mind. Whether that's the case with Lawrence Okolie, I don't know. I'm not in his head and I don't know him well enough as a fighter yet to be able to discern whether that's a sign that he's starting to doubt himself. We'll have to wait and see. In terms of how I see the fight going, I think the fight is going to go long. I see it being a long fight. I think if I had to put money on it, I would say the fight's going to go to points. And as I say, if there is a stoppage, it will be late. Anything can happen in boxing and we don't know that much about either one of these fighters. So you could get an early stoppage, but in my head, I think the more likely scenario is that a stoppage will be late or it will go to points. And I think the winner of this fight, whoever it's going to be, will be the guy who can keep the calmest head. Now, we know that Isaac is a guy who likes to box, and early in fights, he can be quite defensive, and sometimes he can be quite a slow starter, Isaac Chamberlain. And Lawrence, as we know, is a fast starter. I think being a slow starter in this fight and being concentrated on defense is actually going to work in Isaac Chamberlain's favor here, potentially. I think from a game plan point of view, the best thing for Lawrence Okolie to do is not do what he normally does and rush in and try and knock Isaac Chamberlain out. I think that would be a mistake. I think that that would leave him open to counters and that would also expend a lot of unnecessary energy, which might cost him in the late rounds. Because Isaac does seem to be a lot slicker than the guys Lawrence is used to fighting, and potentially he's tougher in terms of his punch resistance. So you don't want to go out wasting energy and leaving yourself open the way Lawrence normally does. Now, people are probably going to be saying, Hatman, of course he's going to do that. That's the only way he fights. Well, maybe so, but he's been fighting a fairly low level of opponent up until now in his career, Lawrence Okolie, so perhaps he didn't have enough respect for them to take his time. When he spars Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois and all these top heavyweights, do you think Lawrence Okolie flies out in the first round of the spar and tries to knock their heads off? Or do you think he boxes his way into it? I would suspect that it's the latter. So if he has respect for Isaac Chamberlain, which he should have, you should have more respect for them than he had for his other opponents, then he's going to box his way into this fight. And if he uses his height and reach, I actually think the best strategy for Lawrence Okolie would be to box and keep the fight at distance. That might seem counterintuitive to most people because most people see Isaac as the better boxer. But think about when Leo Santa Cruz fought Carl Frampton in the rematch. Everybody was expecting Carl Frampton to just outbox Leo Santa Cruz again. But Leo Santa Cruz and his team said, you know what? We've got height and reach over Frampton. Why don't we use it? Now, Leo Santa Cruz is not as slick or as smooth at long range as Carl Frampton is. But he's got the height and reach. Sometimes when you've got the height and reach on a guy, you don't necessarily need to be as slick as he is. You know? I mean, another example would be when Vladimir Klitschko fought Eddie Chambers. Eddie Chambers is a much slicker fighter than Vladimir Klitschko, people. But Klitschko had the height and reach on him, and he was very effective and knowledgeable in terms of how to use the height and reach and keep the slicker guy at a certain distance where he wouldn't be effective. That, to me, would be Lawrence's best strategy. It's also a good strategy from a mental point of view because Isaac Chamberlain wouldn't be expecting it. Him and his team are expecting Lawrence Okolie to come at him, just as Carl Frampton and his team were expecting Leo Santa Cruz to come at them. When he didn't, they hadn't trained for a long-range boxing match in terms of, you know, having to overcome a reach disadvantage. They hadn't trained for that. They trained for a guy coming straight at them on train tracks. And similarly, that's kind of what I expect Isaac Chamberlain and his team have trained for with Lawrence Okolie. They think he's going to come straight at them and try and bomb them out just like he has tried to do to all his other opponents. Whereas if he flips the script and says, you know what, I'm actually going to use this long ass reach that I've got and this 6'5" height and try and make you come to me. Let's see if you can get through my defense. Let's see if you can apply pressure. And then maybe he'll be able to walk Isaac onto punches. I think from a strategic point of view, that'll be the best thing for Lawrence to do. I think if he just flies in and goes looking for the KO like he does normally, that'll be a big mistake and it'll play into Isaac's hands. So I guess we'll find out tomorrow, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Who are you picking in the fight? I'm still picking Lawrence. I'm saying it's going to go to points, and it's going to be a very close points decision win for Lawrence Okolie, maybe even split decision, something like that. That's what I'm leaning towards. But again, seeing as though Isaac seems to be a lot more confident now than I've ever seen him before, and then he's in tremendous condition, then I think it's much more like a 50-50. I'm picking Lawrence, but only by the slimmest of margins, like 53-47 in Lawrence's favor. So let me know how you feel in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out.